Well, those the scenes from outside the courthouse in the last few minutes. I'm joined on the programme by Captain Lesch-Pruitt, former police captain, a spokesperson for Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and also John Lesch, a lawyer, and they are going to take us through the next couple of hours as we watch the openings of the proceeding, opening statements in the next little while. But let's start with our guests. And John, in terms of what you expect, the significance of this trial, your early thoughts?
This trial is going to be sprung in two ways between the prosecution. That video that almost everyone in the world saw, that happened almost a year ago, is going to be critical for the prosecution. The defense is going to be attempting to cast doubt on the reasons for why George Floyd died. Everyone outside that courtroom has their own expectations about what should happen in there, but the entire courtroom is designed to prevent that outside influence and make the decision, the jury, only on the facts and the law.
Lesch-Pruitt, your thoughts, how important a moment is this, do you think?
This is an absolutely crucial moment in American history and also in Black American history. The community has been asking for justice since our ancestors arrived on these shores of America. And, you know, now we are at this moment in time where no one can deny what they saw on a videotape. And so now the question becomes, what type of equity and justice will be received at the end of this trial? Police unions are watching, police officers are watching, and certainly the Black community and their allies are watching, because this is one of the most important moments in our time. And, you know, we're just looking to make sure that justice is served. Of course, Officer Chauvin, we want him to have due process. But again, you cannot ignore what you saw on the videotape.
Sonia, John, stay with us because I'll be back to you in a short here. All right, Larry, we'll be back with you in the next little while. Let's go back to my guest now, John Lesch, who's in Minnesota, a defense attorney, and Captain Lesch-Pruitt, a retired police captain. Thank you both once again for being here with us. John, to you first of all, because we're not that far away from opening statements. How important is that first stage?
It's everything. The percentage of jurors who make their decisions simply after opening statements, after the attorneys are only allowed to say what they expect the evidence to show, the percentage of jurors that statistics show make their decisions after that is very high. It's very high. Now, the attorneys can only say the evidence that hasn't already been excluded, of course, but it's a big deal. It's not argument. The court says this is not argument, but many people treat it as argument, and quite frankly, the jury listens closely to it as though it were argument. So it's critical stage, opening statements.
And John, for the prosecution, they have to prove this beyond reasonable doubt. Now, you have said normally the burden is in the favour of the defence, but with compelling evidence like a video here, that shifts a bit. Just explain a little more.
It's not just, the burden doesn't legally shift, but when you've got a video as compelling as that is, with a white officer kneeling on the neck of a Black man for almost 9 minutes, watching him die, that no juror escapes the impact of that. And it's not just because this is one of the most diverse juries that I've seen on a felony case in Hennepin County of the state of Minnesota, which the state is 83% white, Hennepin County is 3/4 white. It's a very diverse jury. Nobody can escape the impact of that. But also do not forget that the fact that a man has died. And jurors, no matter how much they're told to only make decisions about facts and the law, are not going to forget that a man has died. So while it doesn't legally shift the burden, the defense will be on their toes to give them a reasonable doubt. And that word, reason, is different after they've watched the video and after they know a man has died.
Sonia, let me bring you in and tell our viewers, I said in the introduction, you set up Black Police Experience. Tell me why you set that up.
Well, because Black officers, we have our own experiences that allow us to see through a different lens situations such as this. One of the things that we've been talking about amongst my peers is the fact that we keep hearing this is the George Floyd trial. This is not the George Floyd trial. This is the Derek Chauvin trial. And so we're here to make those distinctions for our community and for the public. Be clear about what this is about. There are efforts to put George Floyd's, for instance, his criminal background out on record. But, you know, Derek Chauvin was not a model police officer. He had a number of complaints prior to this incident, and one of those incidents is where he placed his knee on the neck of a prone woman. So if we're going to talk about equity, then let's be fair. I mentioned earlier that police unions are looking at this trial. Well, the state police union in Minnesota actually helped to find the defense attorney for this trial. So those are the things that are particularly concerning, because we're wondering, when are things going to change? When are we going to stop talking about let's call police departments of bad apples if we are supporting the bad apples?
And on that point, I mean, campaigners so often say that there isn't enough accountability for police officers. It's very difficult to actually get a conviction. Too often the jury come down in the favour of the notion that the officer felt their lives were under threat. Do you understand, do you share those concerns?
Absolutely. You know, police officers have not been historically or traditionally trained to do anything but survive. We're going home at the end of the day. The training does not talk about everyone going home at the end of the day. And what is missing in the incidents that we've been talking about, such as George Floyd, Philando Castile, even an Eric Garner or Walter Scott, is the humanity. Where is it that the police officer actually sees a George Floyd as a human being? George Floyd, in my opinion, was objectified. He was dehumanized, and it made it very, very easy for a police officer to place his knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes while he was saying, "I cannot breathe," and calling for his mother, and just put his hands in his pockets and look away.
And that's what we heard from the family lawyer, Benjamin Crump, outside of the courthouse in the last hour, saying this is not a difficult trial. He was really slapping down that notion that this is a hard trial. He said, simply look at the video. John, let me bring you back in, because in terms of the charges against Derek Chauvin, he faces 3 charges. Just explain for us in terms of how this case will map out, why there are a variety of charges.
Well, the first count 1 is second-degree murder, but a second-degree unintentional murder. What some law students learn in law school is called felony murder. Typically, it's thought of as, you know, if you rob a bank and in the ensuing car chase, somebody dies in a traffic accident, that was a foreseeable result of committing a dangerous felony related to bank robbery. Therefore, you could be charged with second-degree unintentional murder, felony murder. It's an old doctrine, started in the English courts, of course, but in this case, it's combined. It's not separated. The crime that they're saying that Derek Chauvin committed is assault. It's assaulting George Floyd, and because that assault resulted in substantial bodily harm, that's third-degree assault. That is the prerequisite felony. Then they charge him with murder because of a man died. It's a very controversial use of second-degree murder, but it's on the table nonetheless. They do need to show, though, that Derek Chauvin intended to cause fear or bodily harm, and not just follow the police procedures in that. That's why, in my opinion, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get that, to show that intent, as opposed to the depraved mind, which leads us to count number 2, third-degree murder. They need to show, the state needs to show that Derek Chauvin evinced a particularly depraved mind with his actions that resulted in the risk of death and that a man died. The third count is second-degree manslaughter. It's not terribly different from third-degree murder, and it involves recklessness, the reckless endanger of a person's life resulting in death. So those last 2 counts are a little bit similar. You know, I would note, though, that in this case, this trial is different from so many of those previous trials of police officers, because Sonia is right. Historically, in Minnesota and many other states, you've been allowed to say, I feared for my life, and that's why I used deadly force. But this trial, as well as the trial of Mohammed Noor, the last individual who 2 years ago, a police officer, was convicted of third-degree murder in Minnesota, it's going to be really difficult for them to use that defense that police officers have traditionally used, that I feared for my life. How can you say after watching that video that Derek Chauvin feared for his life? That's going to be a really high burden to reach, which is why the burden is a little bit different in this case.
John, stay there. Thanks very much for now, and thanks to Sonia. We'll pause you